Good morning, everyone. So today is the 11th session on the day number 5. So today we'll be starting with the session on IoT-based case studies in agriculture, and ma'am has given very interesting topic that she will be briefing about you. That I have not told you that, but it is very interesting topic that I know for sure. And Let me begin with a brief introduction of Dr. Meeta Shinoy. Dr. Meeta Shinoy has done the BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering from Kerala University in the year of 2007, ME in Embedded System from BITS Pilani in the year of 2011, and PhD in from BITS Pilani in the year of 2018. She worked as a design and developer engineer Tata Alexis Limited hardware or ASIC design team from July 2007 to July 2009. She worked as lecturer in the department of EEE BITS Pilani KK Birla Goa campus from the year 2012 to 2017, and as visiting faculty in the Department of EEE BITS Pilani KK Birla Goa campus in the January 2016 to July 2018. January 2018 to July 2018. She is currently working as an assistant professor in Department of EEE BITS Pilani Pilani campus from the year July 2018 till date. Uh, so, uh, so with these, I would like to welcome Dr. Meeta. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now I hand over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, so very warm welcome to all the participants. So I am told that in the past 4 days, you have been through several interesting sessions on the basics of IoT, foundations on IoT. You had some laboratory exercises as well. We have also discussed about some of the challenges in implementing IoT systems for agriculture as well. Right. So at least some of you, I understand some of you are also experts in this area, whereas we have also a heterogeneous crowd here. So I'm assuming that at least some of you might have a question in mind, whether the system which you are planning to develop with respect to agricultural area, whether it is actually an IoT system or not, right? Because if you look at it, many of the building blocks of IoT, whether it is being embedded systems or networks or cloud systems or software systems, all of this existed for the past several decades. So then what is new in this IoT that which has suddenly come up, right? And many experts even call IoT as maybe a old wine in the new bottle, where they feel that all the building blocks already existed. But now a new approach has come, which has added opportunities to maybe everyone in working in different areas, be it robotics, embedded systems, networks, software, cloud, everything, right? And now we are in a situation where we have to analyze whether we are actually developing systems which we can call as IoT systems or not, right? So before I start with the major topic which I am supposed to talk, I thought I'll just start with the introduction as to whether the system which we are planning to develop is an IoT system or not. How do we assess it? So this is one of the information which was provided in the article, which is in the book Technical Foundations of IoT, where it is mentioned about the explanation given by Dr. Alexandra, who herself is an expert in IoT systems. She provides what is called as a litmus test to analyze whether the system which we are developing is an actual IoT system or not. Okay. So we already know that the devices which are not connected are not IoT systems, right? If the devices are not talking to each other, we cannot call them as IoT systems. Now, we also had wireless sensor networks, etc., which was existing for several years now, several decades in fact. Okay, so are wireless sensor networks alone IoT system? So if I'm going to develop a wireless sensor system for agricultural purpose, can that be called as an IoT system? So what Dr. Alexandra says is, if you are collecting data only locally, say I have developed a wireless sensor network for precision agriculture, and I'm collecting the data locally through several sensor nodes, that cannot be actually called as an IoT system. That alone cannot be called as an IoT system. Or a combination of sensors, actuators, and only local data collection, whatever be the kind of network we use, if it's local data collection, that cannot be called as an IoT system. The other aspects of the IoT system, that is the cloud services, user applications, developer interfaces, this also existed for several, or exists for several years, right? So that alone is also not an IoT system. Now, say suppose some of, I think at least some of my students always say, if I say I have developed, design an agricultural system or precision agricultural system, some of them might come up with simple systems where they have certain motors which control the water flow rate, sensors to measure the soil moisture, such sensors. And probably finally they are doing is a remote control system where probably they will actuate some of the sensors or actuators using a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi, etc. So that is also not an IoT system. Just having a remote control or saying I am actuating something through a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi or something of that sort cannot be also called as an IoT system. That is only adding a certain level of automation to our system, right? Rather than going and manually turning on the valve for watering, now we are doing through a remote control. That is only adding automation to your system. Okay, so that is where we say we add a user interface and do a remote control action. Now, the same thing we might, instead of using a remote control, we might say we might use a network to collect the data, but at the end, the wireless sensor network data is also visible through an app, and we do a app-based control that also need not be categorized as a true IoT system. Okay, so Dr. Alexandra says that can be maximum considered as a end-to-end system because the machines are talking to each other, your things are talking to each other, but that is just an end-to-end system. Or even it can be called as a proprietary IoT system, provided you are taking the data to the internet and the remote control is now through the internet or the monitoring is through the internet. Okay, but still Dr. Alexandra is not calling that as a true IoT system. Okay, so collecting data locally, designing your own network, your own systems, and using the data for your own purpose, that also is not probably true IoT, is what Dr. Alexandra says. Instead, what she says is, if there is a level of interoperability that comes into the system, okay, if there is a level of interoperability that comes to the system, and where we have an ecosystem in which the different devices can automatically tap into the relevant data sources, then only that ecosystem only we can say that we have an IoT system. Okay, so IoT systems, when we develop, it should not be that, okay, we develop a system, we use the data for ourselves. That is not the case, right? A true IoT system would be the case where we are able to share our data with other networks. Whether our network is able to access data from other networks. Say, for example, you are developing a precision agricultural application. Whether your network or whether your proprietary IoT system which you have developed, if it is able to tap in from other resources, other networks, other cloud services, etc., which is maybe meant for another purpose. Say you have a weather station. Okay, so weather data is being collected. But now in your precision agricultural application, you are going to tap in another network which was developed. You are using that resource into your system. Similarly, whether you are sharing your data to the other networks. Say, for example, when we are saying we are developing an end-to-end agricultural system, one major area is supply chain. So whether you are monitoring your system or the crop yield, etc., and whether you can provide data to another IoT system which might be involved in the transportation of goods from one area to another. Okay, so if there is some level of interoperability with each other, the networks which you have deployed, which several agencies have developed, whether they are able to tap into each other resources, then only it can be sent as a IoT system, is what Dr. Alexandra says. Okay, there is no standardization as to, still there are lots of definitions going on for IoT, but this is something which is well accepted. Okay, So what is more challenging here is to develop interoperable systems. So if I am saying the networks are deployed by different people, they might have different kinds of devices, they might have different kinds of networks, Zigbee, LoRa, finally you might connect to the internet. They might have different kinds of semantic information. They might have different kind of syntactic information which is coming. Your data has to be finally context based, right? So your system might be taking a weather data, okay? But let's say you are recording a temperature information, but the temperature has a context, right? A certain temperature in a certain area may indicate a fire, whereas the same can be a normal temperature in another part of India. Okay, so everything is context related also. So when we have developed our systems in such a way that there is an interoperability between all of this, that is when we can say that we have a true IoT system. So this is where we should lead to, but probably we all of us can work in only certain domains. We don't work in all the domains which are possible here, but that gives us an opportunity also. Everyone who are working in computer science, robotics, embedded systems, everyone has an opportunity to contribute. So I am basically from an embedded systems background, as Dr. Parishit mentioned, and I specialize mostly in the networks area and the hardware architecture development area. And the application systems which I mostly develop are the robotic systems, swarm robot or multi-robot systems. So since I have been told that we have a diverse audience here, I have taken one kind of application to start with, which all of us may be easily able to understand, which is regarding the location-based IoT systems. So most of the IoT applications, I think we not say robotics. I think whenever we have any network, let it be an IoT network or whatever be, a network without a position information or a data without a position information has no relevance, right? This becomes more critical when we have robotics applications. So this is a image which I have taken from Dogtooth Technologies. So they have developed a robotic system for harvesting the strawberries. Okay, so here you need positioning system. The GPS positioning system may not always work because they are using this for a greenhouse. Okay, so GPS will not work indoors. There are now adaptive GPS systems which might give some accuracy within indoors, but still you will get accuracy of only certain meters when you are using GPS, right? But when you are looking at applications such as this collective robotics application, you can see multiple robots interacting with each other. You can see that on the same robot structure itself, there are multiple robotic arms which are working together in tandem. You can see here, on the same robotic structure, there are multiple arms which are working together to harvest the strawberries, right? So in all of this, you need to find the position. Where is your robot exactly, right? Not only this particular structure, you also need to identify what is the position of this arm in the XYZ coordinate also. Okay. Another kind of application where we need position is something like a UAV system. In this case, GPS, if you ask whether it is feasible, yes, it is feasible, but the issue is GPS provides an update rate of only in the order of 1 second. You will get an update in position only in order of 1 second or so. And position accuracy also you will get only in terms of few meters. So if you are saying you have a swarm of robots or UAVs, if they are working together, they may not even identify a position difference because the GPS gives you only that much resolution. So if a synchronized activity has to happen among the robots, you need still position information, right? The synchronization can be for putting the pesticide or doing the soil survey or whatever be it, but you need position information. Another possibility is when we have a wireless sensor network, when we have a large scale wireless sensor network with large number of nodes, most of them being battery operated nodes, it is again a challenge as to how do you collect the data. Okay, so sometimes what we do is if a network is very large, we cluster the networks into smaller segments, have cluster heads used for clusters, and then provide the data from one cluster to the another so that you can take the data to the base station. But those who are working in wireless sensor networks area will understand this is a very power exhaustive task, you need to have several mechanisms to save the power because you're using battery operated energy, right? So you should do have mechanisms to minimize the collision. A node should not waste unnecessary energy in listening to the nodes which are around it and so on. Okay. So here also robots are being used these days. What can be done is Dr. Siddhartha, can you please mute your? Okay, thank you. So in this kind of systems also, you can use robotic devices. So for example, in the previous diagram where I had shown cluster heads, which are the red circles here, I've just shown it in this diagram also. So let us assume these are the cluster heads. Okay, so the cluster members have collected the data and have given to the cluster head. Now, what can be done is, rather than these nodes sending the data to each other and then sending to the base station, the easier thing would be is use a robot or use even a data mule. Data mule, which can be one kind of data mule is a robot. You can even train pets, etc., which can go around, collect the data. When I say go around, collect the data, if it's a pet, it will have some wireless device on its body, which will collect the data from several nodes and take it to the base station. So this is also another power saving thing, right? So rather than doing multi-hopping and then taking the data to the base station, here we are using a robot or a data mule to collect the data. So you can still save one. But then how will the robot find the position? That is another issue, right? So I have just tried to list some of the applications where positioning is very important. We are looking at applications where we are GPS denied applications. So first, let us see what is the kind of localization which can be done in robots, which can be used for even agricultural purposes. So generally, when we say localization, in this context, let us assume that we are trying to find out the x, y, and z, that is in the horizontal plane and the height. Okay, x, y, z position of the node. Let's not assume it is in latitude, longitude. Let's assume x, y, z. Okay, so we can assume if we are taking an area, we know the latitude and longitude of this area. Okay, and then we also mark it as some relative position. Let's say this is 0, 0, 0, and we try to find the position of every object in this farm which is of interest to us with respect to this coordinate. Okay, so we are doing relative positioning with respect to one identified coordinate. That is what we are looking at. Okay, and this is, let's say this is our farm area which is of interest. So the different kinds of localization possible are self-localization and beacon-based localization. So in self-localization, what is done is the robot finds the position using the sensors which are placed on itself, or rather it uses the sensors which are only placed on itself. It will not depend upon any other sensor information. It uses only the sensors which are mounted on itself. Okay, so example would be a robotic arm which is finding its position using the inertial measurement units, right? Or a robot finding its position using inertial measurement units, IMU, which has an accelerometer, gyrometer, or a magnetometer. We also know the issue with these systems, since in these systems we find the position using double integration. As time passes, this will show errors, and as time passes, the errors will accumulate, and the position can be drastically removed. Okay, if you are only relying on self-localization, we are using the IMU-based sensors. Other possibility is use some known points whose position are already identified. Okay, which we call as the beacon-based localization. Say, for example, here, if I am assuming that I have a farm and I have kept certain beacons. When I say beacon here, it's a wireless sensor node or any node whose position is already known. Okay, so the position of these beacons are known in terms of X, Y, and Z. Now, if we have any other node in the system, which can be our robot, okay, or a UAV, whatever be it, it can find, so let's say this is our robot, it is going to find its position with the help of these beacons. Okay, so this is not self-localization, it is also using the, okay, should I think, can I take the questions towards the end? Okay, so I think I'll take the questions towards the end. Okay.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in this case, what is done is we are using beacon-based localization. So we are going to use some signals which are transmitted by the beacons. So it has to be wireless signals. The wireless signal can be of from different sources. You can have Wi-Fi, you can have Bluetooth, you can have LoRa signal, you can have UWB signal, etc. Okay, so some wireless signal we are going to use. In self-localization, we don't depend on any other beacon, any other external source. Okay. Now, in practical systems, you may need a combination of both as well. Okay, for example, if I'm assuming that I am developing a system like an Amazon warehouse or any other warehouse for, let's say, agricultural application, okay, where I'm moving the goods from one location to another. As I said, if I use beacon, I have to use wireless signals, which is again power constraint. Okay, I can also, so in that case, what I can do is I can use beacons at certain intervals. Okay, so maybe I will use beacon. I will find my position. Then I will start using self-localization. I will use my own sensor so that I may not use the wireless signal. After a certain point, I know that now the position will start deviating. So then I will again use beacon-based localization and so on. Okay. So practical systems may use a combination of both as. Now, beacon-based localization is what I am going to discuss today mostly. And beacon-based also there can be of two types. One is range-based, okay, and one is range-free. As the name implies, in range-based localization, first the range is calculated. The range between the beacon and this robot or this node whose position has to be calculated. This distance will be calculated first before we actually do the XYZ calculation. That is the principle. Whereas in range-free localization, we don't try to calculate the distance. We just, those are mostly proximity-based systems. There, say, suppose if this is a data mule, I just want to know to which beacon I am closer to. In that case, I can use range-free localization, where I might just look at signal strength and then identify that, okay, my robot is now close to this beacon. So what is more important to us is actually range-based, which is mostly used for accurate position, where you say you want centimeter level localization, etc. What is more required is range-based. These are accurate methods, and range-free are approximate methods of localization. So simple methods of localization may be, as I said, if it's a beacon-based localization, if we are using range-based, we first have to find the distance. Okay, first we find the distance and then we find the position. So assuming that, let's say we have 3 beacons, to keep the thing simple, I will assume we need only X and Y. I'm not bothered about the height. I'm assuming all the nodes are at the same height. Okay, it can be easily expanded to XYZ as. So let me take a situation where I have 3 beacons, okay, whose position is known, and I have another robot whose position has to be identified. So some of the techniques for beacon-based localization are trilateration, multilateration, etc. Mostly this tri indicates the number of beacons which are used in the system. So in this case, how can I find the position X and Y of this particular node or robot is the question. Okay. So what I can do is I can use a simple Euclidean formula. Okay, Euclidean distance formula, where I say if xy is the position of this node, x1, y1 is the position of the beacon. Okay, if I can take the square root of x minus x1 square plus y minus y1 square equal to d. Okay, so this is the distance which I was talking about. So assuming that we know the distance, we know the x and y position of the beacon. Okay, so the unknown here is x and y. So if there are 2 unknowns, if we get such 2 equations, we can solve the x and y, right? So that is what is done. So similarly, I will, instead of x1, y1, I will also use another x2, y2, another beacon, and calculate the distance d2 also. Okay, but in such cases, what we can see that we have the overlap in 2 different positions. A circle intersects at 2 different positions is what we can see here. If you are assuming the coverage of the radio is purely circular, etc., which may not be ideal. But still the principle is, if you know the distance between the beacon and the target node or the robot, If we have such at least 2 beacons, we can find 2 positions. If we can add 1 more beacon, we can exactly find out where is this particular robot. Okay. So this is assuming the distance is known. The problem now is actually how to measure the distance. If the distance is known, then the localization is very age-old technique of trilateration. To measure the distances, there are different techniques. You can use signal attenuation, you can use time period, and so on. We will just basically look at 2 techniques, and we will look at the research problems in this area, and then we will move to the next one. So we will first look at the identification of position D using the signal strength between the beacon and the robot to be positioned, or the node to be positioned. Again, we will go back to the principles of communication theory itself. You know that the received power will be the transmitted power minus the path loss, right? So any wireless sensor node or any radio module generally gives a mechanism to measure the received signal strength. Here I'm calling it as received signal strength indication. So basically from our traditional two-way path loss model, I can say all of these factors are constant. Okay, this much is constant. So what is variant here is this value. Okay. And this is what I have to find out, distance. So the summary of this equation, what it says is, if a radio module can measure the received signal strength, I can indicate the signal strength as a proportional value, as a value with respect to distance. There is some constant involved, and there is a path loss exponent, which is eta. The challenging part here is how to measure the path loss, because path loss is dependent upon various factors like your environmental parameters, your nearby obstacles, okay, which may not be in the direct path between the beacon and the slave also. So your environment is what mainly decides the eta or the En factor. Okay. So summary of this is, say suppose if I know that my robot is going to be used in a known environment, okay, if I'm going to use the robot in a known environment, the C is constant. The eta can be calculated through historical information as to I run the, I set up the system with beacons or multiple beacons in my farm, okay. Through historical information, when the position is known, I can put my robot at known positions. I know RSSI, I know C, I can exactly calculate what is N. So I can train my environment, I can understand what is the parameter for N based upon my environment. And once the environment is properly understood, I can find out position D, which is unknown. When I use it for practical situations also, when I want to find the position of the robot, I can apply it, the same thing to the equation and calculate, because I have already trained the value of N. Okay, so this appears to be very simple, but in reality, this is not the case, because as I said, N is an environmental dependent parameter. Even though we say if this is the beacon and the robot is here, the RSSI received at 1 meter from this beacon would be different in this direction, would be different in this direction. Okay, what I record as RSSI today may not be the same when I measure it tomorrow at the same time, maybe even because of the temperature or environmental variations. So finding the accurate path loss is also going to be a challenging task. So there are several works which are already conducted on this, and this is already, some practical systems are already available. So this is one of the work which was published, in which they tried using different signals, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, LoRa, etc. Out of this, LoRa has the lowest frequency, right, 915 megahertz. So we know the advantage with LoRa. LoRa is, since it is using a lower frequency band, the attenuation is less, so the signals can propagate for longer. So the distance between the beacon and the robot can be quite large also. Whereas other signals, they operate at a higher frequency, so the power drop attenuation is going to be higher and the range gets limited. Okay, so they have tried the same technique by using different beacon signals. Okay, they try to train the system, find the path loss factor, and then actually calculate positions for various scenarios. Okay, so they kept the robot at different positions, 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meter, etc., and they tested. So this is what they have captured. even in one direction itself with respect to beacon, you can see that sometimes it's very difficult to identify the position with just RSSI information. It is not that with RSSI, I will be able to calculate or interpret D here. Because you can see here almost every position have the same RSSI. Here I can see I am at a farther location, but I have a lesser RSSI. Sorry, higher RSSI. More power is reported when compared to this answer. Okay, this is because of the path loss factor calculation or error in the path loss factor. But in general, we can see if you are using a low frequency signal, the power consumption would be lesser if you're looking at energy efficiency, etc. Accuracy will also be lesser. Okay, because lower the signal, they are not very much robust to multi-path effects. Lower frequency of the signal, they are not very much robust to multi-path effects. So if RSSI cannot be used, RSSI is not a good method. Another method which is possible is using time of flight. Okay, so between the beacon and the robot, don't use the wireless signal strength as a parameter. Use the time which is taken for the beacon signal to move from the beacon to the robot. Okay, use time as a parameter, not signal strength. So in this case, what I can do is, I can use beacon, let the beacon transmit a signal to the robot here or the slave here. Let me record the time at which I am sending the beacon. Let me record the time at which I am receiving the beacon at the robot. I find the difference in time. The simple formula distance equal to velocity multiplied by time, I can actually calculate my position or the distance between these ones. Okay, so with RSSI, with this time of flight, etc., what we are trying to do is find distance so that we can put it in the trilateration equation and get the position of the robot. This is also very challenging because the velocity of RF signal is 3 into 10 raised to 8 meters per second. If you are looking at centimeter localization, etc., you can understand the time difference will be in the order of nanoseconds, picoseconds, etc. Okay, and you are measuring one time at the beacon, another time at the receiver. So these beacons should be synchronized also. That should also be required. Okay, so the clocks in the order of nanosecond, picosecond, etc. to record time is very critical here. So that this is also not very easy to do. Okay, the more accurate you want centimeter level accuracy, etc. The time synchronization and the accuracy in time stamping also becomes very important. So with this, as I said, there are different kinds of beacons. You can use Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi gives you a reasonable range between beacon and robots. Bluetooth is there. Ultrasound is particularly preferred for this method because the velocity is very less. It is 330 meters approximately per second. Okay, instead of 3 into 10 raised to 8 meters per second for other RF signals. So ultrasound, we are using acoustic signals. Okay, so time synchronization issue would be limited there. We don't need time in terms of nanoseconds, picoseconds, etc. But the issue is we have a very limited range, meaning we need large number of beacons if we have a large farm. Okay, so that is also not very practical. So far what I have mentioned is maybe not a very, these are existing systems if you look at it. We have figured out or very comfortably figured out how to find localization or position when the beacon and the robot is in the line of sight condition. Okay, when I say line of sight, here these two are visible. This is my beacon and this is my robot. They have a direct line of sight. In this case, it is very easy. I will use RSSI or I will use time of flight, find the distance D. I have such 3 beacons, find the position using trilateration. In practical scenarios, if you have multiple robots, other robots can also be obstacles, right? You can have reflections. You can have multipath. Okay, so multipath, the higher the frequency, you are more robust to, because the different multipath signals can be clearly distinguished if you have higher frequency signals. So in that case, that is why I said here, higher the frequency, as you can see here, if you go to Wi-Fi, etc., the frequency is higher, so the error is also lesser because it's more robust to multipath signals. Still, we go for higher frequency. If we can go for much higher frequency, which is in the ultra wideband frequency, which is in the range of 6 to 10.6 gigahertz, or 3.1 to 4.8 gigahertz, etc., you can still get much robustness in terms of multipath. Okay, so in practical scenarios, what we can see is LOS can be easily handled, or there are methods to handle it. As I said, multipath, if you take a higher frequency signal, it becomes more robust to multipath. The real challenge is handling the non-line of sight conditions, where the beacon and the anchor nodes are not in the line of sight condition. Okay, where these are not able to hear to each other and the signal passes through the obstacle to reach the other node. Okay, so in this case, the issue is the D which we calculate will not be based on signal strength or based on time of flight, will not be correct because it has already passed through an obstacle. So signal strength will be varied, the time will be varied. Okay, so the practical scenarios, if there is non-line of sight, there is an obstacle here and the signal actually goes through the obstacle, in that case, none of these equations will be valid. Even one position calculation wrong and you put it in the trilateration equation, the entire position calculation will be ultimately wrong. Okay, so that becomes very important to identify the non-line of sight situations. If your beacon and the node is in non-line of sight at all, if a beacon and a node is in non-line of sight, don't use the signal from the beacon for the trilateration. That becomes important. Okay. So that is where now the current research work is leading to, and that is even we are also working on, where we are using UWB signals here because the ultra wideband signals are more robust to multipath interference. So the major concern is now only non-line of sight scenario. So in our lab here, we have a test bed actually with UWB systems, where I would mainly mention the difference between some of the existing works and what we are looking at. So most of the current works which you might find in some of the publications, what they're trying to do is they try to identify certain signal characteristics. Okay, say for example, if it's a UWB signal, they try to find out if there is an obstacle in between, how the signal strength varies. Okay, so since it's a UWB, you send it as a pulse modulated signal. So if a one pulse is transmitted, when you receive it, you actually record the impulse response of that pulse. And then we can look at the different peaks in that signal received. Okay, and using this, some of the signatures of the signal, when we receive the signal, through some of the characteristic of the signal, you can try and see whether there is a line of sight condition, whether there is a non-line of sight condition, whether there is a multipath signal, etc. There are various features which are used of the beacon. Some people use the power as a parameter to see if there is line of sight, non-line of sight. How much is the noise, general noise in the atmosphere? Okay, if you signal strength, which signal strength can be taken as actual signal and which can be taken as the noise. Okay, so several parameters from the beacon signal to identify certain signatures. Okay, that is being used. And what people generally do is they train the network, okay, or they develop a system which learns the non-line of sight scenario. Say for example, I have a greenhouse plant. They try to put the beacon at different locations. They try to put the robot node at different locations, put the obstacles in between, or have other objects moving around, collect large number of samples in the non-line of sight scenario and line of sight scenario. Okay, so they create a database with these signatures which I mentioned. The signatures can be power, the signature can be the time recorded, the signature can be the power recorded, it can be the signal strength. Several of these parameters will be recorded. Okay, and then they try to use some machine learning algorithm or artificial intelligence algorithm to find out whether a new scenario is belonging to a non-line of sight scenario or a line of sight. If it's non-line of sight, they ignore that beacon, they don't take the signal from the beacon and go ahead. So that is what people see. Generally, there are several techniques. Some people use decision trees. I think we are already familiar, so I will not go into the details of it. To train the network, they can use decision trees. So basically what we are saying is you develop an ML algorithm or an AI algorithm. You give inputs, which are the signatures of the beacon. different signatures can be identified. You train it or give inputs in both MLOS and LOS scenario. You train your system so that the output is either a 0 or 1, which indicates whether this is a non-line of sight scenario, line of sight scenario. If it's line of sight, use the signal. If it's non-line of sight, ignore the measurement and don't use it for position. That is what is used. Okay, so this MLAI can be different techniques. You people use decision trees, they use SVM, support vector machines, they use ANN. So generally in papers, this is what you will find. So, but the issue with this system is, even if you collect 3,000 samples, 4,000 samples with non-line of sight scenario, in a practical environment, the obstacle placement can be completely different, right? It can be completely different from what you have trained. The different moving objects can be the obstacle and so on. So also we need a system where if you train in one place, it is easy to deploy it in any place, any other place. It should not be that, okay, I have to train the system every time I want to deploy something. Say, for example, a UAV-based system. If you want to generalize and have a system which can be used for spraying pesticide in any plant, I cannot say I will train in one scenario itself, right? So what is required is avoid the need of training in non-line of sight scenario. Can you develop a system where you only use the line of sight scenario? Based on that, you train your system or develop a technique based on which you can say, if I feed in the new data, I can say it is line of sight or non-line of sight and then use it. So I don't want to have a dependency of training the systems using non-line of sight signals. Okay. So this is what we are working on, and without using the MLOS, we have now received a good accuracy of around lesser than centimeter range. Very good accuracy we are getting, even if we have a non-line of sight scenario. Okay. So some of the existing systems which you see as commercial products, they provide the accuracy only in the line of sight scenario. It cannot be used in the practical scenarios where there are non-line of sight conditions as other than this, another aspect which we are working on is the harvesting. As I said, again, the localization we had developed as a prior preparation for the harvesting activity. We are also working on harvesting of fruits. We are working on actually coffee cherry harvesting and so on. So here also the scenario is slightly complicated because one, people assume that there are different kinds of AI ML techniques which can do fruit identification, etc. But in reality, that is not the same because you are depending on large data sets for it. The data set in one area and other, you might see a large variation. So there is need for developing custom networks for it. Also, how do you move your robot to the target, right? You cannot use just camera images. You cannot just do with RGB images. You need the depth camera because you want to know how far is your robotic arm from the fruit, right? So you need depth sensors for doing it so that you can measure the distance to the fruit. And also we need soft robotic structures because you don't want to harvest your fruit in such a way that it gets crushed to something of that, right? So you need more of a soft robotic structure which works like your hand, which can actually pluck the fruit very carefully without damaging the fruit. So rather than going for traditional robotic structures of the arm, you also need other methods for soft robotic systems, which can carefully pluck the fruit acid. So looking at it, we can see that, yes, it looks interesting. There are several avenues in it where we can use the robotic systems like harvesters we have mentioned. Some issue in the screen. Is the screen visible correctly? Okay.
Yes, madam, it is visible, clearly visible.
Okay. So you can use harvesters where multiple robots combine together and do a harvesting activity. We have scouting operations where a robot can actually do the soil sample analysis and find out whether a soil is suitable for a certain kind of crop, etc. Okay. So it looks very promising. So a lot of robotics applications are possible in these areas. But you can understand many of this, if it is dependent upon data, you are saying soil analysis can be done. a new person who is coming to the agricultural area, if I want to get into the agricultural area, start my crop, I want systems which can say which crop I should use for my soil, right? I want systems which will say, I am deploying a robotic system, but I still want to know if there is a pest. How can I actually detect which pest it is and give the apply the pesticides accordingly, and so on. Okay. So there are several recommender systems also, as you might be available, where several software companies have associated with agricultural universities, Krishi Vigyan Kendras, etc., and have developed recommender systems where when we send the data to those recommender systems, they will give a feedback. Like if we send a soil information, maybe which can be collected through a UAV or through sensors, etc., they will give a recommendation as to which crop is required. If you send a pest information, we have systems which will give us what kind of pesticide you can use, etc. But as you see, everything here, the robotics, etc., even when I interact with some of the people who are actually in the agricultural area, actually doing farming, all of them have still a doubt as to everything looks very glossy. You can have all of the system done. You can do everything from estimating what will be your yield. So if you know what is your yield, you can even plan the marketing strategies. Once your fruit is ready, you can ask your Vekla networks to take it to the supply chain and so on. But is such a system actually feasible in our country? Whether our farmers are actually able to spend this much amount of money and invest on building sensor networks, deploying robots, and so on, right? So this is something which we have to, probably everyone who is working in this area will have to actually think of. There are research problems, but whether we are delivering it in a very cost-effective manner. So I think many of us are actually concentrating on developing robotic systems, etc., in a very cheap or cost-effective manner for the farmers. But still, some new concept is coming up, especially which is very applicable in the context of India. Because in the context of India, we have challenges almost in every phase. In the pre-production phase, we have issues like the soil quality is dropping, we have small land holdings, some of the new farmers, they want more information as to what crop has to be used, what kind of pesticides have to be used, which can be actually provided by IoT system, right? Through recommender systems, we can provide them. There are issues in production also because we have shortages of labor. With IoT system, robot system, we don't want to take away labor. In fact, there is shortage of labor in our country. The systems are not affordable is a big question, right? Also, even if, let's say, we deploy all these robotic systems, we have an agricultural farm ready, we don't have mechanisms to link to the supply chain and have the transportation facilities, which can also be through IoT itself. Okay, so how do we ensure that all of this work together to provide a very cost-effective solution to the farmer? Some thought process has gone into it, and I think our government is also supporting something called as farming as a service. So I think most of you are aware of software as a service, right? Through which we are giving this recommender systems. Like through the robot, if you collect your soil sample, you send it to these recommender systems, software as a system service, they will give you the recommendation. You take your data through any other sensor network, etc. You feed the data to this recommender systems or SAS, software as a service system, you can get recommendations. But now the question is whether you can deploy this kind of robotic systems on your own, right? And also you have developed a crop. After that, do you have the supply chain mechanism where you can distribute it and ensure profit, etc.? To enable this, something called as farming as service has come up, and this I think is very important, especially if you want a lot of work happening in the area of robotics also, because robotics can actually improve the production, but it's important that we give farmers a cost-effective solution. So this is something which, instead of using only software as a service, you include farming as a service where your corporates or other agencies can contribute in setting up the network itself, okay? Or say you can share the networks, or you can lease the network, or if you're saying a robot, real farmers may not be able to get a UAV only to do a soil analysis. It's practically not feasible that a farmer get a 7 lakh rupees of hyperspectral camera or a multispectral camera for soil analysis. So what we do is a farmer can hire the services through farming as a service, okay, where the links are established through the corporates or vendors who can hire the robotic services itself. They can use that. They can use a pay-per-use model where whatever services you are getting, you pay according to it. Okay, so all the three features are given, not just software as a service. Here, what we want to have is, in addition to the software as a service, the recommender systems, etc., provide solutions for the farmers to deploy the robots itself, provide the farm management solutions, such as soil quality monitoring, which pesticide you should use. So such farm management solutions. Don't stop with that. Even you can provide facilities to access to the markets. Maybe you can use the IoT system itself to book a vehicular service, to use the robot, or to move the agricultural produce to another area. So by the time you are ready with your crop, you have the entire supply distribution system also ready. Okay, so this is something which is very required if you want to use robotic systems on a large scale. So some studies, so this is one company, which is Bain and Company, which is along with IIMs are actually trying to make this a reality in India. There are some other companies, like some of this, this I think it's mostly in a research manner. In Switzerland, people have tried this, where they have the sensor networks deployed, they have robotic systems deployed. Okay, so this network, the hardware, the thing, etc., is available on lease. You can get it as through rent. You can find from whom you can purchase through IoT system. Okay, all of that is possible. The network services also can be hired. The software as a service, which is a part of farming as a service. This is the SAS part of the farming as a service, which will give you the recommender systems and so on. Okay, so this is where the interoperability I was talking about comes into picture. Now you have robotic systems, sensor networks, all of this, vehicular networks, all of this deployed by different vendors. Okay, whichever be the vendor, they should be able to communicate with each other, send the data through the varied kind of networks, send it to the software as a service system. Okay, where you are looking at the interoperability. Actually, you have interoperability at the network level, device level. Okay, the syntax of the data which comes from these devices would be different. The context of the data, as I said, temperature recorded at one place might mean something. A temperature recorded at another place might mean something. Okay, all of this. So if we have something as this, I think farming as a service is through robotic applications is very well feasible in India also, where we achieve actual IoT systems where we can actually tap into the varied kind of data sources. We can enhance the productivity through the robotic applications also, wireless sensor networks, etc. We can, to build the software as a system platform, we can actually bring in the help of the actual agricultural scientists, Krishi Vigyan Kendras, etc. and have a complete interoperability in the scenario. So rather than, I think in the present context, many of us are working individually. So this gives us a stage where all of us can combine together and develop systems which are actually interoperable in nature. So I think I'll stop with this. I think there were several questions, so maybe I can take them. So let me. So if there are any queries, you may please post it in your chat form. Okay, I think due to shortage of time, somewhere I have to go a little fast also, but if there are queries, you can please post. Or you can even write it to me or mail me afterwards. Okay, so do we need to take care of overhead in the case of self-localization? So the overhead, if it is there is no overhead in terms of wireless communication in case of self-localization. But yes, when you are developing your system, if you're looking at what is the overhead you are mentioning about, whether it is the algorithmic overhead whether it is the interrupt-based overhead, etc. Yes, that is also something which has to be taken care of. So that is done at the embedded system level, right? That can be, but there is no wireless overheads communication overhead. Okay, so there is another question from Dr. C.H. Vithalmi. In case, are we assuming that all the beacons are transmitting equal power? If they are transmitting equal power, the simple equation applies. If not, then we have to modify the algorithms. So you can say they are using the same power. Yes, yes, Pratish, you are right. We are assuming clocks are synchronized. While I say so, I am also, there are methods through which we can use time information without having the beacon and the robot synchronized also. Okay, so you need precise time in terms of nanoseconds or picoseconds, etc. That is important. But there are techniques. If you are interested in this field, you can look at techniques called as time difference of arrival. Okay, with that, you can avoid the need of synchronization between the beacon and the robot. Because synchronization is a lot of overhead. If you have 100 beacons in your network, you have to synchronize them frequently, right? So I just presented a very basic system. There are methods through which you can avoid the synchronization also, but still use time information. But accurate time stamping is important. Okay. There is a question. RSSI option, will it work for asynchronous time? Yes, it will work because we are only looking at the signal strength in that case. Okay, but if we are saying we want to use both RSSI you can use without time synchronization. You just have to keep record as to like whether you are receiving the information from all the beacons. Need not be time synced because we are just looking at the signal strength. Okay. So are there any other questions? Okay, so what are the ways to deal with localization underwater? So localization underwater is generally done through the acoustic signals, as I said. Okay, so you need acoustic modems to be used as beacons. You cannot use RF because RF attenuates very highly in underwater. So you need acoustic signals itself. Sonar sensors you can use ultrasound signals where the attenuation is. Acoustics is the principle. You cannot use RF for localization underwater. So in the beacon, instead of transmitting RF, let it send acoustic signal and use the same principle. Signal strength or time of arrival, etc. You can do localization. Okay. So I think that is also one area, right? When we say agriculture, I think we generally touch upon only farming. There are other fisheries and all of those also, which actually need a localization underwater. Some applications are in that area also. Okay. Okay. So what is the impact of noise for UWB communication in the IoT network? So generally it is said that the higher the frequency signals, there is much robustness. Okay, this is because in UWB, etc., we are sending the pulse signals. Okay, so the pulse signals will be of very small width because we are using a very high frequency. Okay, so even if there is multipath from different objects, also the different signals coming through the different multipath can be clearly removed. Noise, generally noise handling, pure noise, which is not as multipath, etc. Noise handling can also be done better in UWB because you are using anyways. With UWB, your power also generally increases. Okay, so the same rules as that applies for the other communication systems can be applied, where you look for the signal to noise ratio and extract noise and so on. But generally, higher the frequencies, you have more robustness. We can still go for higher frequencies, but the issue will be the power. We will take in more power if you need much higher frequencies. So we need to attain some middle path something. Okay. So maybe if there are further queries, I think you can still mail to me. I think my profile ID is already shared with you. So if there are any questions, you can.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
It was very nice talk, ma'am. I think all the any questions by the participants.
Whatever is there typed so far, I think I have handled it, sir. I have,
Good morning, madam.
yes, yes.
I'm
And
on
who
from
is speaking?
Bangalore. Yeah.
Yes.
You just explained about this very nicely, excellent session it was. My question about you are not touched anything about artificial intelligence to look the problem of the crops. Crops are a lot pesticides issues are there. Crops are
Yes.
dying, and those issues are not touched, madam. But you are excellent. This data transferring methodology is excellent. And I saw your paper also that 2017 you published a paper with
That was an ultrasound, I guess, on the
yeah,
same
yeah, very nice,
principles.
sir. So can
Now
you
we are
highlight
looking for
about it,
new
madam?
paper.
Yeah, please highlight about it, madam.
Yeah. So, what is that you want to see? One reason why I didn't talk about AI is because uh, that becomes too subject specific. I thought I am supposed to discuss an overview about robotics in general. Okay. So AI. Okay. So I think your
No,
session.
in the connection with data transfer, the data are required even for the crop healthiness to know. The robotics connected to AI. In that regard, you can get the data and crop health you can also understand, and then some remedy steps can be given out, and thereby the yield can be improved. That's what my thought is like.
Yes, yes, it can be done. So generally, see, now what we are looking at is even when we are developing this harvester system also, one thing is if we are looking at AI-based information, we are mainly dependent upon the data, right? And the data, as I said, which we collected from one farm can be different from the data in other farm. So right now, in the current format, in my research work, what we are looking at is we are trying to use a combination of image processing techniques, which can sometimes give more accurate result when compared to the database networks also. That is also what we are finding, because over dependence on data is a real issue at times. So that is one aspect. So we are trying to use a combination of traditional image processing techniques as well as the dependence on data, because these kind of AI based networks, we find that they are sometimes more robust to effects such as lighting, the size of the object, etc. That is something which we are working on. And other thing which we are looking for is, since this data now, since we are saying we are developing a large IoT system where data can come in from multiple sources, rather than having a pre-trained network. If you're saying AI, we want a pre-trained network to do a fruit identification. We are trying to develop systems which can be reprogrammed. The network can be trained on the robot itself, so that through network, if we get new data, it just learns again. So adaptable networks is also something which we are looking at. So if you look at some, I think if some of the like fruit identification, if you look at it, there are some techniques which are used based in FRCNN networks, RCNN networks, etc., which you can find. But those are very large networks, like which can be used for distinguishing maybe like n number of objects. So if you use such pre-trained network for your system, the possibility of getting an accurate prediction is very less. Whereas more data you get if you can retrain your network so that it improves with time. Okay, such networks are being developed, and we are also looking, in that case, it should be that the network supports retraining. So we are looking at other hardware architectures for it, FPGA based training, GPU based training, etc. So that the retraining can also be.
Yeah, very nice, madam. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your. I hope, ma'am, that one soft robotics part that we have talked.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I didn't include it here much, sir. Maybe like next time I will put, or maybe I will also be adding more information in my website. So yes.
Yes, that soft robotics is another application that of IoT, and ma'am, on her profile, that initially I have saw that very interesting project, and
Yes.
I got
Ma'am,
fascinated that. So
of
I
course.
wanted my audience to get benefited out of it.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
I
So,
thank you. I thank you, ma'am. This is our, I think, my guide, Professor Surekha Bhanot, recommended you, and I think all the participants have hugely benefited out of your knowledge. Uh,
my pleasure.
so we would like to have more sessions from you in the coming near future, ma'am.
Sure,
Uh,
sir. Maybe at that point, I'll be discussing more about the soft robotics aspects also.
yes, yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you for giving this opportunity.
Uh, Thank you, ma'am. So I'll interact a little bit with audience.
Yes.
Uh,
So, may I log out?
you can log out, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Hello.
Yeah, good morning, Professor.
Is that the schedule for today? I have sent that 3:30 p.m. Is the quiz, and 4 p.m. that brief valedictory session will have. So some request I have received for increasing the time of the quiz examination. Uh, is half an hour fine? I think 30 questions, multiple choice. It was good. If you would like, I will extend the time.
Because sometimes the network is the issue because the people are sitting at different location now. So you can consider
Ah.
that as well, right? Because if you are at one place, then there is no problem at all for half an hour. But the people are sitting at different location and might be that somewhere weather is disturbing. So might be these are the problems.
Okay. Some other participants, I'm open that there is no issue that I can do anything which to facilitate by that all the participants. So can we keep till 5:30 or 6? Can you suggest me?
Then
Six, six.
my advice to you is, let's say you open at 3 and end up at 6. So 3 hours is enough to manage all the network
So
issues.
we'll open at 6
Yeah.
3:30 only. So we'll end at 6:30.
Fine, sir. Very
Okay.
good, sir. Very good.
That would be
Professor, the
fine.
new timing. Professor, new timing, how to get any information, how to get new timings?
Which
Via
one
mail.
you
Chart or
said?
somewhere, somebody, if they type, will can follow it, Professor.
New timing about what?
The quiz timing and valedictory timing.
That I have put on the email that briefly I have put in yesterday email.
Yes, sir.
Like 11:30 we'll have session by Professor Navneet Goyal. He
Okay.
will be giving another perspective. I think sir area of research is mostly data mining and those things.
Okay.
So you'll be hugely benefited out of his knowledge there. And at 2 p.m. we'll have the lab sessions by Dr. Namita Mittal, ma'am.
Okay.
And from 3:30
Okay.
we'll open the link for this I think quiz.
Quiz. Okay, Professor.
For quiz link will open, and then by from 4 p.m. we can conduct the valedictory for we'll keep valedictory short and crisp. So I would request all of you to come kindly. That time we'll have one group photo also. How to take the group photo, that will have all your you can turn on your videos, and we'll take a screenshot, and by that we'll keep a record of it. So I will request everyone to join for valedictory function. You were very cooperative for last 5 days. I could see. I would say one thing that I have shared all the attendances as per the WebEx. And in that, if you can see that the average attendance is around 140, 145. So that is quite good matlab ratio that we could hold on to the audience, and they are really that those who are attending from the day one, they are really liking this FDP. As I could see, that is a very good encouragement for us.
Sir, quiz link will be open till what time?
From 3:30 it will be open till
6:30.
6:30 p.m. Is it
6:30.
fine?
Okay.
So 30 questions will be there.
Yes.
It will be all multiple choice. There will be no negative mark, and I'll that maybe you can edit multiple times. I'll keep that. Generally, I keep only one submission.
You're not audible.
Generally, I keep only one submission for most of the quizzes.
Okay, sir.
So
Thank you.
I'll keep. You can edit after submission, but at 6:30 it will close. So I'll request all of you to submit that. What we'll do at 3:30, I'll float one opinion form also by Triple quota. So in that, I request you to give us some sort of feedback or opinion for us. It will be for our internal uses. Apart from that, I know that I have to update your attendance. That I will do positively by this weekend on the Atal portal. I will have to update your that marks for your quiz. That also I'll do by this weekend only. And after that, you need to give the feedback. You need to enter the feedback on the Atal portal. So these three things are mandatory. That your 80% attendance is mandatory, 60% score in the quiz is mandatory, and then your giving of the Atal feedback on the Atal portal, that is also mandatory. I have heard that it comes in your own profile of the Atal portal. So there you need to give the feedback, right? So these things you can take care, and rest of the things is fine. One thing I would say that have you seen? I have shared yesterday night. It was little late. I have shared all the YouTube links for the videos for 4 days.
Yes, sir. We have seen your
Yes,
your
sir. Yes, sir.
uploaded
We
talk.
have seen.
It is well planned, well organized, and very good. This FDB program been organized by you and your team. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity. Very good thing you have given.
That thing is that I'll discuss more that you can give all this feedback at 4 p.m. I'll request all of you kindly come for the valedictory, give your feedback that time. So it will be, it matters a lot for us. Okay?
Sure, sir. Sure.
Dear Professor,
Yes, Mohan sir.
Yeah, our buses will leave at 4 o'clock, Professor. I am on the bus. I may not get the network, Professor, because I have 30 kilometers to travel from my college to house. So I will be using my mobile. Don't mistake, Professor. I try to give feedback if possible. Otherwise, my network problem may be there. Once I leave the bus at 4 o'clock, the buses will start. Anyhow, please excuse in this regard, Professor. Thank you very much. You are well organized, Professor. I really remember you forever. Very nice arrangement, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That will upload all these remaining sessions, as well as this inaugural session also. That videos will upload everything.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let us meet at 11:30 a.m.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Happy to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah, sir. Actually, I'm very happy to see the feedback.
Little sound is coming feeble. That can you increase your volume?
Yes, sir. I'm trying. Hello.
Uh, Sound is still. I'll just try. I'll increase my volume maybe. Ah, please tell.
Hello,
Ha
sir.
ha.
Can you hear me now?
Ha.
Hello.
You are audible, sir.
Yeah, sir. I am very happy to share the feedback, and it is really a good experience to attend this online FDP. I am attending for very first time online FDP, and I have given a lot. But happy to share, but where that feedback link will be available.
It will come in the evening, that afternoon, 3:30 p.m. And you kindly come in the valedictory and you attend that
Sure, sir.
session also, sir.
Sure, sir.
So
And
that
at Atal portal, that there will be another link.
that will be for Atal record actually, and
Okay.
this is for my personal, will keep with our in our file.
Yeah.
That
Yes. Sure,
it
sir.
is same that you are giving. You will be giving independent feedback but just to keep a record of it. So Atal portal will collect separately. That they may share with us. I don't know that. I'm
Okay.
not privy to that.
We have to log into Atal and then select this particular workshop and then
Yes,
give.
and it will be actually. I think the Atal the feedback will be activated once your attendance details I will submit, and I think 80% attendance, these things will be there.
Okay, sir. No, you please later on share in the email to all of us the process. Okay,
Yes,
of
yes, I
giving the
will do
feedback on
that.
Atal because that will be again counted for you, and we have seen that the effort taken by you and your team and the punctuality that is shown is really appreciating, and we are
Yes.
really happy to see.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. Actually, I'll share. I would like to share one thing that, as I said, sometime the PPTs and PDF are they are the copyright or the experts have
Yeah,
invested
they are
so much
actually
time
doing their
in
research
that.
work, and there is
Yes.
a they can't expose it.
Ah,
We
they
understand
they
it.
they sometimes they are reluctant. So I'll tell one thing. I generally don't means on behalf of, since I'm organizer. If I would have a
Yeah.
participant, I could have requested. So you
Yes.
are well within your right to request that to the experts. But since I'm the organizer, if some expert is providing me, that I pass on to my audience. So since he has given me to pass on, that much I will be doing. I'm expected to do that, and I do that. But on my personal behalf, since I'm the organizer for this, I don't go forward and ask them. But what we know that you need to study also for the quizzes. So I ensured that you get all the materials for the FDP, and I uploaded the things in the yesterday night on the YouTube and sent you the link also.
Yes, sir.
Maybe
We are
whatever
checking.
the bit I can do, I have done that. So could not do that upload the inaugural ceremony because there is one issue is coming. The video feed is not coming. Only we have audio feed. So there is one issue we are encountering. So that is the reason that I did not uploaded the inaugural ceremony that video till now. But if we'll fix, then we'll upload that with video. Otherwise, we'll upload the only audio file also. Okay.
Okay, sir. Fine.
Yes. So let
Yes,
us
yes.
meet you, all of you, at 11:30 a.m. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
See
Sure,
you.
sir.
Bye.
Okay.